Hello and welcome back. We are here for the MLB DFS Slate Breakdown. All-Star break is over. We got a big-time 14-game slate today. It looks like a fun one. It looks like a wild one. Jump in. Let's enjoy this ride. Now, before we get into the full show, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe to our videos. It helps us out a ton to continue to give all of this content out for free. And if you have not already, you gotta come join us at LineStar. It's the best deal in DFS. Only $29.99 a month. Gets access to all of our props, all of our DFS stuff. It really is a great tool, and you should probably join us. Now, let's get into the fun. We have no slate review to go over. There was no big main slate yesterday, so we are just going to jump right in to going over this 14-game slate today. Now, it is a big one. There's a lot of things to go over here. 14 games on the docket and a lot of very, very interesting spots to attack. Hitting-wise, we have some warm weather. We have winds blowing out. Weather in Cincinnati at Great American Small Park is super warm. So that's always very interesting, leads to a little bit more home runs. It is also warm for the Braves game in Atlanta, which another good home run situation there, not to mention that great Braves offense. And then Colorado, very warm there. So we got a Colorado slate. A lot of ownership, is going to go there. So a lot of different ways you can go on this slate. Some really good pitching as, most of the pitchers been off for a while. So, all right, let's get into the ownership now. We got Luis Castillo, 8,900, coming at 43% owned. So extremely high owned for a slate of this magnitude. I do not think you have to follow them. However, he is in a terrific spot. Detroit striking out 23.7% versus righties. As a team, they just aren't that good versus righties. And Castillo is averaging 48% more fantasy points at home. So this spot looks like it really plays out for Castillo extremely well. The one thing I do have to bring up is that he hasn't been good lately. 5.64 FIP over his last 5 starts. That's with a 3.52 ERA, so he has been getting a little bit lucky over that short term. We'll see how that plays out, but with all of that, he also only had a 19% strikeout rate. Now, he's had some time off. Maybe if he had something bothering him, that has been fixed because of the time off. And he is in an amazing spot. 26% K rate over his last 20 starts. We got a 21% combined K rate on him. Now that combined K rate is being pushed down a little bit because of his last 5 starts K rate being so low. So the algo is leaning into that a little bit more because it's been his, recent form. However, it doesn't mean that's totally who he is. His combined K rate over the last say 20 starts in this situation would probably be more like 24-25%. So it's not a bad spot, and the LineStar projection is liking him quite a bit with a 24.65 fantasy point projection at only 8,900. So he's in a good spot. Understand why everybody's going there. Next, we got Tyler Glass now. He's getting a little bit of a Tyler bump, it looks like. He's been pitching really good lately. His strikeout rate is way high, 35% over the last 20 starts, 39% over the last 5 starts. And his FIP right around where it's been over the last 25, so he is locked in. He's been pitching really well, 33% combined K rate. Now, he's $1,400 more than Castillo, but that K rate, combined K rate, is way higher. So I think you have to like the upside a little bit more of Glass now than Castillo. And at slightly less ownership, and versus KC, it's another really good matchup. Maybe better than Detroit, 26.7% K rate versus righties. And then their WOBA and ISO is bad versus righties also. So it's a very interesting spot for Glass now. I do not mind it whatsoever. Next, we got Charlie Morton, 29%. It's versus the White Sox. White Sox have not been great, and they're not great versus righties. Strikeout 25.7%. Meanwhile, Morton, 20% more fantasy points while at home. He's in a very good spot. The one thing I do have to say is that with this game being in Atlanta, there are some favorable hitting conditions. Also, weather may have a chance to give an issue here, maybe an in-game delay or something, but it's so much of a question at this point in the day that I really can't tell you that if weather is going to be an issue or not, but it is a spot to pay attention to the weather to make sure everything is going to look good up into the start. Now, Morton's done really well versus the White Sox in the BVP data. Combined K rate solid, 9K, 26.6% combined K rate. So all of that looks great. After Morton, we got Ohtani coming in, 17%. One of the things, I will say it now and I'll say it again on the FanDuel pitcher part, Ohtani for FanDuel is not going to be getting his pitcher stats. You're going to be getting his hitting stats on FanDuel. I don't know why FanDuel is doing this today, but just understand if you're playing on FanDuel, you are getting him as a hitter, not as a pitcher. Now, get into this matchup for Ohtani. Houston, was hitting decently coming into the break. They've had a layoff, so I don't know if I can take that recent form of them too much into consideration, but they have been hitting well, and Ohtani is just an extremely good pitcher. You're looking at 30%, 32% K rate over his last 20, 23.6 combined percent K rate. I actually do like Ohtani today at lower ownership. There's just a giant ceiling with him, and when he's on, you're looking at 10, 12 strikeouts, and that would be enough to likely make him in a winning lineup, especially if nobody else does that. Verlander coming in next, 15% owned. It's versus these Dodgers who can definitely hit. We also have wind blowing out at Citi Field, 13 miles an hour. This is a game, however, weather could cause an issue, so make sure to pay attention. Now, as Verlander as a whole, look, the dude's turned it around. He's pitching really well. 2.74 FIP over his last 5. His K rate's a little lower than normal, but he's only 8K. And for his projection, that salary, I don't mind it whatsoever, even versus a tough Dodger team. At least you're getting him at low ownership. Kenta Maeda. Look, Maeda going into the break was pitching great. His K rate was way high. Had a really good game versus Detroit, a really good game versus the Royals. Got lit up a little bit against Oakland. But what this is really telling me is he's beating up the guys he should beat up. Struggling a little bit against, teams like Atlanta. And struggling, it wasn't that bad. He gave up 2 runs. It was just that he only had 4 Ks over 5 instead of, 8 Ks like he did versus Detroit here. So I think Maeda is a very interesting play here. Going kind of low owned. The guy, when he's on, has major strikeout stuff. We know Oakland can strike out, 24.4% K rate versus righties, low WOBA versus righties. I think Maeda is a very interesting play. Paul Blackburn, he is extremely cheap. There's not a ton of upside at this price. I don't mind it. We still are waiting on him being confirmed the starting pitcher, though. Good old Dick Mountain, Rich Hill. He's been decent lately. Don't love this spot for him. He is cheap, though, and we have seen some ceiling games from him recently. Carlos Rodon. Now, this is a very interesting one to me. So, another week removed. He made his first start, went 69 pitches. He then had a full week off, pretty much. I would expect this pitch count to go up a little bit higher. Maybe he's into the 80s. The game is in Colorado, and it's very good hitting weather with almost 90-degree temps. So I think Rodon is interesting at his salaries. He has a great K rate. You're not going to see him at 8,500 for long. And the dude can absolutely pitch. The one thing, he's going to be on a pitch count. So I don't know if you want to get there just because he's likely to only go, say, 80 pitches or so. And me saying that is just my expectation. I have not seen news exactly of what his pitch count is. So just understand that. But I think he is kind of interesting even in a spot like Colorado. So nobody will be going there. I don't love it, but I understand if you want to go there. We got JP France versus the Angels. Now I think this one's kind of interesting. He's not that pricey. His K rate isn't good, but we know he can work pretty deep into games, and I would expect him to be able to. Remember, we got Trout on the IL, so he's not likely to be in the lineup here. And as we've seen before, if Ohtani and Trout aren't in this lineup, this Angels lineup can be a little bit difficult, or can be a little bit weak. And Rodon also shouldn't be in the lineup. Brandon Drury, I don't think, is back from the IL yet. But, we'll see about that as lineups come out later. But I think JP France is a little bit interesting here. Fairly cheap. Could probably work pretty deep into the game. Another one we got to talk about, Corbin Burnes. Look, nobody's going to go here because the Reds have been hitting really well. But look, this guy is cheap, and he's a very good pitcher. Even though that it is really good hitting weather in Cincinnati, you also have to realize that, hey, that ball's only going over the fence if they're making good contact on him. And that's one thing that, people haven't really been able to do against him lately. 25% of the contact has been soft. So the soft contact is not likely to go over. One thing that I do need to bring up, and it will likely bite him a little bit today, is the fly ball rate at 44%. I would expect him probably to give up a home run today, but as long as it's a solo shot, it's not going to affect him that much. And combined K rate of 22 at 8,400 isn't too bad. It is a very risky spot, but you got to bring up one of the premier pitchers of the game at low ownership with a discounted price. Now, with that all being said, understand LineStar projection is not great on him. 12.74. Also, our community is so far just saying fade. But it's an interesting one. Jose Barrios, he was locked in going into the break. Is he going to stay locked in? Maybe, maybe not. He is versus a good Diamondbacks team, but he is at home, so I would say it is interesting. Julio Urias, he only made 2 starts coming back from IL prior to the break. He got up to 88 pitches. He could be fully stretched out. This one's interesting. The big aspect here is he's been way worse away. 43% less fantasy points away. But nice projection for the salary. So I think you need to consider. Another thing, though, is just check that weather, because that weather could be an issue there. Kopech versus the Braves. I can't do it. But we know he does have a real high ceiling sometimes when he's hitting it. But he is worse away. 47% less fantasy points away. Alcantara, 6,800. What is going on with him? He just has not been able to find his Cy Young form last year, but we know he has it in him, and he has been a little bit better lately. 3.96 FIP over his last 5 starts. The K rate's still not there, but his K rate's never really that high. He is more of a very efficient and work deep into the game kind of pitcher to get his fantasy points. At this ownership and this price, I think you have to consider him just because we know that upside. But this Baltimore offense is extremely good, and I'm not one that likes to attack it, but there is definitely reason to. And if you're playing 150 lineups, I would probably have some for sure. All right, now let's look at FanDuel here. Check around at their ownership. So Castillo, highest owned here as well. Glass now coming next, and then Charlie Morton. We didn't go over Brian Bello very much, and I really want to bring him up more so because of the weather situation. So Chicago does have major weather risk today, but the winds are blowing out very hard, and we know Wrigley loves to give up home runs when the wind is like that. So it's very interesting here. Pitchers may be off limits in this game because it looks like it would be a situation where they maybe get to play an hour and then it would be a delay. So you can't count on Bello being able to go his full setup. But if this game does play in full, I think the hitting in this game is very interesting with the wind blowing out and relatively warm conditions. We got Burns, 9,600. He's in a decent spot. We talked about it, but not a great with it being in Cincinnati. Carlos Rodon. On FanDuel, with only taking one pitcher, I probably won't be on Rodon. I would, however, on DraftKings with the two spots with him not being that expensive. Verlander, I think, is kind of interesting. 9,200. But once again, weather is an issue there. JP France is a little interesting. Eduardo Rodriguez, personally, I'm probably saying is a little too expensive. However, Seattle versus lefties, 26.6% K rate. The upside is here. We have seen him having some major upside throughout this year. So it is interesting. Don't hate it. Nobody's going there. Let's see what else we got here. Maeda, only 7K. I think that's very interesting for FanDuel. Urias, unowned, very interesting. Alcantara, I'm probably staying away on FanDuel just because the price is around other good pitchers. On DraftKings, he's, in the 6Ks. He's under 7K. It's a little different, and I would consider him here. Now, let's get into stacks. Get into some fun hitting situations. A lot of different ways we can go. A lot of different good hitting spots today. Now, our highest projected own is the Yankees. It is in Colorado, so no surprise here. They're in a great spot. They get that elevation. They're versus Gomber, who's not great. However, has been much better lately. 3.93 FIP over his last 5, 5.69 over his last 20. It's a little bit of an interesting spot for sure. The Yankees offense is okay. They did get a new hitting coach. Is that gonna, put a fire under them a little bit? We will see. Tampa Bay, pretty interesting here. Alec Marsh isn't that great of a pitcher. Tampa Bay offense is very good. I don't mind going there. New York, Milwaukee. So we talked about the hitting situation here in Cincinnati. It's warm. Winds are, not really going to be helpful. They are going across the field. But Ashcraft can let some home runs go. He hasn't been great lately. 7.3 FIP over his last 5. 5.14 over his last 20. And, the Brewers lineup is okay. But the story here is really the hitting weather and in that small Great American small park. So I think they are interesting. San Francisco Giants versus Dick Mountain is interesting. I like that one. I think the Giants are going to go very low owned, and this is another spot where it is warm, so that ball should travel a little bit easier. Cardinals are interesting. We're not totally sure who they are going to have as the starter they're going against yet, but we will see. Minnesota's popping up a bit. And the Braves. I think the Braves are very interesting, especially if they're not that high owned here. Michael Kopech, we know he can get shelled, and this is a situation where, with warm weather in Atlanta, he can give up multiple home runs. This Braves offense is just insane. So I think the Braves are very interesting at their low ownership. Now our highest projected is the Braves. We got two different lineups of the Braves being our highest projected. Now both the salaries are up there for these stacks, so you probably would have trouble to fill these stacks in. But there are some cheaper ones like the Rays that are coming up. We know we like the Rays. We talked about that. Boston is popping up. They aren't that expensive. Hendricks somehow, limits runs being scored. But he may have trouble with the wind if this game plays. Once again, check weather for this game. Cincinnati, it's versus Burns. Because it's versus Burns, there's not much ownership. But remember, there is a 44% fly ball rate when he's pitching. So there are a lot of fly balls, small park, good hitting weather that could be bad for Burns. Dodgers versus Verlander. Verlander's been good lately. This Dodger offense seems like it can hit anybody. So a lot of different ways we can go here. Let's check some value spots. Oakland is popping up versus Maeda. I don't love it. Maeda's been really good lately. Even against a good Atlanta offense, he only gave up 2 runs, and he's been crushing offenses that he should crush. So that's an interesting one to me, but they aren't getting any ownership, and they can absolutely put up some points here. The Brewers. Brewers' value spot is just great today, so I think you got to consider that as well. Pittsburgh is another one. Stripling hasn't been good lately. 4.98 FIP over his last 5, 4.73 over his last 20. We know this Pittsburgh offense can hit a little bit, and it's decent hitting weather there as well, and they're at home. Miami, kind of interesting. Kremer's not a great pitcher, so I get it. Now let's look at the ceiling here. No surprise, we got the Braves topping it. Cincinnati is popping up, which makes a lot of sense. The Cincinnati offense has been unreal lately, so that is interesting. Boston and Cubs, I think, are both kind of interesting if that game looks like it's going to play, but pay attention to that weather. Let's make sure we're not missing anything. FIP-wise, Gomber, Alec Marsh, that is what we have seen. And Milwaukee, Ashcraft, and Marsh. So a lot of different ways we can go today. The implied runs go to the Yankees at a total of 6. No surprise, being in Colorado. They are against Rodon. And anytime you're in Colorado, you can pick on the pitcher, even if it's a good one. So don't hate the Colorado stack with a 5 implied total. So if you look, a lot of teams have high implied run totals today. It is very interesting. Likely going to have to get one of the top half teams right, and then maybe a bottom half one for some cheap guys or something. But it is a very interesting slate. I think Yankees look good. Braves look good. Cincinnati's a decent spot. Milwaukee's a good spot. Cardinals are probably going to be a good spot. I think it's going to be Trevor Williams starting, but we're still waiting for that. Regardless, this Washington bullpen isn't great, so I think you can pick on them. Tampa Bay, I think, is a great spot. Boston Cubs, watch the weather. So a lot of different ways you can go here. Blue Jays are interesting. Ryan Nelson isn't a great pitcher. He's been better lately, but not a great pitcher, and giving up a lot of hard contact. Giants are interesting. Twins are interesting. So many different ways you can go on this. Some really good pitching, some good hitting. You guys have a great day. Good luck. Glad baseball's back, and have a good one.